Hey, welcome back to the pod. It's really nice to be talking to you again. Thanks so much for tuning back in. If you've been here before or if this is your first time, thanks for choosing to listen. Can we please just start today with a round of applause for me, because this episode will be releasing on the 17th of August, which is exactly 2 weeks since my last release, which is the most consistent I have managed to be since 2024. And I've been saying it's coming. I said back in May, I'm getting back to more consistent episodes. I know it's taken me 3 months to actually follow through with that, but we're here. I'm almost not quite sure how to start this episode. It's going to be more of a personal chat about my experience, or what my experience of the past few months have been, which honestly haven't been the greatest in terms of how I've been feeling mentally. I am definitely on the up now, and I felt a lot better over the past couple of weeks, certainly. So this is more about how I was feeling through June and July. But during that period, I did start to feel like I did when I was diagnosed with depression again. And I just want to talk about it. I am not recording this with any particular listener in mind, to be honest. I just know that I personally have often learnt the most from listening to other people talk about their own personal experiences and reflections, and through watching people that I can relate to in some way navigate different challenges. And sometimes I do just think observing other humans and listening to them talk about their lives can teach us so much more than we will learn through just listening to people talk about research and findings from studies and books without any real life context. I'm not saying one is more valuable than the other, and there is a definite need and space for both, but this episode is going to be more on the talking about my personal experience side, in the hopes that maybe somebody can listen and feel heard or seen or understood in a small way, or that I can share some perspectives that I've sort of held on to that have helped me through this little rough patch. And yeah, maybe somebody else could benefit from hearing some of them as well. Or even if it can just help somebody else feel a little bit less alone. I think sometimes it can genuinely help to know that other people are going through, if not exactly the same, similar things. And again, maybe it can help somebody else gain a new perspective on their own circumstances. So in terms of what's actually happened, going through what has felt like at times a little bit of a hellish patch mentally has honestly been really unexpected, because things were going so well after I finished my degree back in September last year, and I didn't expect to start really struggling again so soon after graduating. You know, when I was in the run up to my final exams and coming to the end of the degree, I was so ready for that chapter of my life to be done. I could literally taste freedom, and like I was desperate for it, and I was so happy when I got it. And things have been going so well since I'd finished, and I'd just been absolutely loving prioritizing my time for things that bring me joy, and I've been so happy with almost all facets of my life. Of course, there's never going to be a time where everything is perfect, but generally I was very happy and I was feeling really positive about almost everything. I just had what felt like a really solid sense that things were good until I didn't. I think for quite a while I had been feeling increasingly anxious for no reason that I could really find, and it's quite hard to tell when it actually started, because I think sometimes things can get very slowly increasingly worse over a long period of time before you start to really take note and realise, oh, I need to do something about this. And June was when it had gotten to that stage of, oh, this has been going on a while, I think, and now I need to actually pay attention, start writing things down, trying to notice patterns, try to do something about it. But however long it had been going on for before that time, it just kind of got worse and worse until it gave way to this really low mood. Instead, I've personally often found that I will either be feeling very anxious or very low generally or repeatedly over a period of time, but I won't often experience them both in the same sort of time frame or on the same day or in the same week. So it felt like I was very anxious for a long time, and then I hit a really low point, and I think I cried almost every day for about 3 weeks on my trot, until finally I had a day at work where I felt physically pretty under the weather going in, and I ended up just breaking down in tears mid-shift, and I wasn't able to calm down, so I just ended up going home. But that again really took me by surprise, because ordinarily that is never the kind of reaction I would have to feeling unwell. There was nothing else that I could think of that could have elicited that kind of reaction out of me that day. And especially because I'd still felt well enough to go into work. It wasn't like I was really in pain or struggling. It was just like, oh, I'm not 100% today. But once I was home, I talked to a couple of close friends about it, and they both said, I think it's probably the right time to speak to someone, which is the point where I kind of have a conversation with myself where I went, okay, this is something that we probably need to be taking a little more seriously now, thinking about what we're going to do about it. After that, I reached back out to my therapist again, who I stopped working with back in November because the need for it had kind of waned, and I'll talk more about that later on. But that's kind of a speed run of what happened. And now I just want to talk about some of the things that I think might have fed into it. I want to start with chatting a little bit about the whole expectations versus reality of coming out of uni and getting a low pressure minimum wage job, which is what I did. I've worked in a cafe as a barista since January. Up until June, I had thought that it was working out pretty well for me, but now I think I know that one of the things that has potentially contributed to this plummet in mood has been that the excitement and joy and feeling of freedom of having a job where I clock in, clock out, and don't have to worry about work until I clock in for my next shift has kind of waned slightly, and the anxiety and the unease at not knowing what I want to do career-wise or what the next step for me is in terms of a job has increased. And actually, it's not even not knowing when the next step is job-wise, it's not knowing what the next life stage is. For me, I, at this point, don't even know if I want children, and I don't know if there's any progression for me doing what I'm currently doing, working, making coffee. And it feels like a very big shift. I think when we're kids, we always know that in less than a year's time, we're going to be moving up to the next academic year where we'll be learning new things. We'll probably have new classmates. It's going to be a time for new and different experiences. And, you move up into secondary school, and then you know that within a few years' time, you'll be moving into sixth form or college or whatever you do when you hit 16. And then if you follow the same kind of path as I did, you go straight from sixth form into uni without taking a gap year. Uni, I feel like, is even more fast-paced in terms of you get through so much in 3, 4, 5 years is what I ended up doing. You feel like you're constantly progressing through these life stages, and it's almost like I've gotten to the end of this academic train. I've done school, I've done 5 years at uni if you include the gap year I sort of took and kind of half studied in, and I've gotten to the end and there is no new life stage in sight. There's no inevitable progression. Nothing is laid out in front of me anymore as a next step. So as silly as it sounds, theoretically, if nothing changes, if I don't change anything, I'm going to be making cappuccinos and washing dishes and unblocking the cafe toilets until I retire in 50-something years' time. And I know that that's not going to happen because it is pretty much fully within my control, and I will not let myself go 50 years without making any kind of life changes. But the fact that I don't know when the next progression is going to happen, I don't know if I'm going to be able to move up within this company, I don't know if I want to go and try something else and do something new, all this unknown, I am starting to find, or I think I have found for quite a while now, quite anxiety inducing. And it's something that I don't hear a whole lot of people talking about, but I can imagine even if you come out of uni and land your dream job in somewhere, you go straight into working in the field of work that you wanted to, it must feel really weird to have gotten to this big finish line, and to get there and kind of think, well, what now? Is this it until retirement? Because there is no guaranteed change anymore. I think as an adult, if you want change, you have to make it happen, which can sound really obvious, but I think it's something that actually, for a lot of us, we don't experience that until we get out of university, we get out of the academic train. We've always had the next step put in front of us for the entirety of our lives up to this point. And I know it might just sound a little bit odd to some people, because it's like, well, of course you're going to progress. Like, you're not going to stay and work the same job for 50 years. You know, people get promoted, people change careers, things happen. But I think the point I'm getting at is that none of it is guaranteed anymore. It feels more uncertain, which feels a bit more scary. I think certainly from what I remember, all throughout school, we're told to get good grades so that we can do well in our exams, go to a good sixth form, get good grades, do well in your exams there so that you can go into a good university, get good grades, do well in the degree so that you can get a good job. And it's like I got to the end of university, thought, oh crap, I don't know if this is the career path I want to go down anymore. So I've gotten a job to pay the bills, and now it's like, what do I do next? I certainly feel like I've got to the end of this ultramarathon, the ultramarathon being my academic experience, my academic years, and instead of there being a next bigger, more exciting, more challenging challenge afterwards, it's like I've got to the finish line, I've done my rest and recovery, and instead of receiving that, it's like somebody's pointing me to a treadmill in the corner and been like, okay, so what's going to happen next is you're going to hop a mat and you're going to walk on the spot until you work out what you want to do next, which could be in a couple of months, could be in a couple of years, could be in 30 years. And so now I am literally just walking on the spot with no idea how many months or years it will be before I am able to get off. I know some of this might sound a bit dramatic, and it feels quite funny talking about it in a sense, because right now I am feeling quite a bit better. So I'm not feeling these things and thinking these thoughts as intensely as I was before. But when I was really struggling, I think that is genuinely how I was feeling and what I was thinking. And it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg scenario where I don't quite know what came first. I don't know if the low mood is what started first, which is what made the thoughts worse, or if the thoughts caused the low mood. But all I know is that once they were both sort of on the table, the thoughts were definitely contributing to the mood and worsening it. Also, I do really want to make it clear that this job wasn't prescribed to me. It was an active choice that I made to seek out this type of employment. But like I've kind of outlined, I think reality can vary widely from our expectations, and I do think that is partly what has left me feeling this way. You know, a big motivator for me getting a minimum wage job was that I really wanted to experience what I thought a quote unquote normal life was like outside of the pressure cooker that was the music industry and music college, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is where I did my undergrad degree. Any musicians listening won't need telling this, but with music it can be so hard to mentally clock out, I think. So hard, because there is so much pressure, probably mostly internal pressure, but externally as well, to consistently be improving and pursuing perfection, getting better at your instrument, getting more practice in, getting more networking done, seeking out more experience. Your career is a never-ending project. And like I said earlier, I was seriously craving this feeling of clocking out of my shift and going home and knowing that my time was 100% mine to do what I wanted with, and there was no lingering anxiety and no pressure. I'd earned the money to pay my rent, pay my bills, pay for food and a few extra luxuries, and now my time was just my own to enjoy and relax. Which also sounds a bit funny to say, because I'm saying that I wanted to experience not having a never-ending project, and then I've gone and filled my free time with doing a podcast, which is the definition of a never-ending project. But it's different because I know I don't rely on it for cash and to make a living. So I'm doing this 100% out of choice. I could drop it at any time I wanted, which I'm not going to. But anyway, I think somewhat naively, I also thought that getting a minimum wage job where career progression might be nice, but primarily it's just a job to pay the bills, enable me to live and pursue the things that I love. I thought that would take a lot less of my mental energy than studying the violin at uni did. And I thought that I'd be able to go away and do an 8, 9, 10 hour shift and come back full of as many beans as I had in the morning and ready to go to town on some really focused podcast work. And again, the reality is that that's not quite what's happened. I think that I thought that because the work that I'm doing isn't mentally challenging in the sense that once you know how to do it, making coffee, steaming milk, doing pretty tulips on top of lattes, clearing tables, working a till, none of those things are mentally difficult. So I thought it wouldn't take anything out of me. But in actuality, during that period where I think I was depressed again, I was coming home from work every day feeling like the life force had literally been sucked out of me. I think to summarize, I thought that if I got a low pressure / low intensity job, I would still have an excess of time and energy to put into what I really, really care about, which is the podcast. Whereas in actuality, I've had much less than I thought I would. And some of that probably has to do with the fact that actually I don't know if I would call my job a low intensity one in terms of where I work. It is minimum wage, is unskilled work, but they have very, very high standards and the days do sometimes get stressful. And again, anybody who works in customer service doesn't need telling that, yeah, we get so many lovely customers and there are people that I always smile when I see them coming in and we can have a really nice chat. But you also get the odd bugger who comes in and is just an arsehole. And those kind of interactions, they do combine and they add up and they get on top of you, I think, or they can do. And I do only work 32 hours most weeks, so I know that objectively I do still have plenty of time, and absolutely there are things I could be doing to more effectively manage my time so that I have even more time to pour into it. But it is still less than I'd anticipated feeling like I had, and I think I just feel a little bit lost. Like for the last 10 years, I had my whole future planned out. I wanted to be a musician. I've known that since I was 14, and then I knew I wanted to be an orchestral musician, and I always knew what the next step was going to be. And I don't have that anymore. There are no next life stages in my future left to look towards, and it is really hard getting to the end of a 10-hour shift sometimes and thinking, shit, is this still what I'm going to be doing 10 years from now? Those fears are starting to get quite loud. Those kind of thoughts and worries weren't the only things that I think contributed to this sudden plummet in mental health. I've gone through some relational issues as well that it's definitely not the right time to talk about on the internet, but that therapy has really, really been helping me work through. But I think in combination of relational issues and stress and work-related issues and stress, the ones that I've talked about and other ones, all of that in combination is what I think was the bulk of the problem. So after that horrendous crying session at work and speaking to my friends about it, getting back in touch with a therapist, even after my first session back, I started to feel a little bit better, to be honest. And things are definitely on the up. That was 4 weeks ago now. And I'm feeling even better still. And I'm feeling pretty close to getting back to that sense of everything being okay again. But there are other things that have really, really helped me get through this patch, aside from therapy, in terms of things that I've done differently and perspectives that I've kept in mind that I want to talk about and see if anybody else could benefit from. The first one has been keeping in mind an aim for a general and overarching sense of okayness, as opposed to aiming to constantly be feeling elated or in a joy state. I think defining what happiness means to me has been a really helpful exercise in the sense that it has helped to put my circumstances into perspective, and it's helped me identify what is actually necessary for me to maintain my general happiness and what is unnecessary. Because I think sometimes we can throw a lot of unnecessary effort into gaining things that we mistakenly think that we need in order to make ourselves happy, whereas in reality we are making ourselves more unhappy by wasting our time and energy and effort on gaining them. There's a really great self-help podcast that I listen to called 10% Happier, and it's hosted by a guy called Dan Harris, and he had Bruce Hood on as a guest last month, who is a psychologist who's actually based in Bristol University at the moment, which piqued my interest right off the bat because Bristol is actually my hometown, for anybody who didn't know. But anyway, they started the episode with a chat about how they would define happiness, and Bruce defined it as a general sense of feeling comfortable and the ability to feel comfortable in the midst of life's ups and downs. They also kind of discussed this idea of unhappiness potentially being our default because our lives are so full of challenges, and the difference between maybe happy and unhappy people lies in people's varying abilities to overcome and bounce back from those challenges. In other words, happy people are people with the ability to overcome and progress through the downs in life, whereas unhappy people maybe feel that way because they're not as able to confront the challenges that lie in front of them. And then they also chatted about something which I've spoken about before, which is that permanent happiness doesn't exist, and we need to be able to experience pain to appreciate happiness and know what it is when we're in it. But the main takeaway I got from that conversation was that happiness is a general sense of okayness and being okay on balance, and happiness by that definition is achievable whether you're in the midst of a shit show or not. That episode dropped at a kind of perfect time for me. I think I got that message when I really needed it, and it helped me better establish my own goals. Often when I talk to my boyfriend Ed about how I'm feeling, I will talk about my baseline emotion, by which I kind of mean how I've been feeling generally over the last few days or the last couple of weeks. And then I'll talk about what I'm feeling in the present moment, and those two can often be very different. Up until June, I think for almost the entirety of the year, if you'd have asked me what my baseline emotion was at any point, I would have told you that I was genuinely just happy. I think I would have rough moments or rough days where I would feel sad or stressed or anxious or angry about a situation, but underneath that was always an underlying feeling of, do you know what, like, I'm okay, things are good, like, I love my life, I love my boyfriend, I love my friends, I love almost every aspect of my lifestyle, things are positive. You know, there was a really solid confidence that, hey, I'm going to be able to overcome this, and I still feel overwhelmingly lucky and positive and grateful for my circumstances. Whereas I specifically remember a conversation that I had with Ed on a day in the middle of this depressive episode where I've been feeling awful for the day, which was kind of a norm for a bit, but we'd gone out for a walk to try and cheer me up, and we were going to go and get dinner at Mackey's, and we'd taken Uno with us, and we were going to take McDonald's to the park, sit and play Uno for a bit, and I was really looking forward to it. I really like McDonald's. I really like playing Uno. I like being outside, and it was a really, really sunny day. I think getting fresh air and moving was good for me. It made me feel a little bit better. And he asked me, how are you feeling? And I was like, do you know what? In this moment, I actually feel good. I'm feeling good from walking outside, and this is going to be a fun hour, and I'm happy in a way, but I do still have that baseline feeling underneath of sadness, and that things aren't okay, and that this is going to be a nice hour, but once we're back home and I'm left to my own devices again, I'm probably just going to start crying. And actually, I think it was during that same walk that we had this conversation, but I was kind of trying to explain to him what it feels like to say that I'm happy in the moment, but I still feel depressed. And I was saying, when I feel mentally well, it's like if I had a gap in my schedule, nothing planned, and I just had to fill it, I'd probably be more than happy. There'd be so many things that I could think of that I'd like to do, and I'd happily get on with something. And I said, when I'm not feeling well and when I feel like I'm depressed, it's like if I'm not consistently managing myself and finding things to do with my time to try and make me feel better, if I'm left with any gaps in my schedule where I don't know what to do, it's like the helplessness and the lowness just gets on top of me, and I will just sit and cry, which I think is how I ended up crying almost every day for weeks on end, because it was like the minute I wasn't distracted, that was my default setting. All of that is just to illustrate that how we're feeling in any one moment can be very, very different to how we're feeling generally about our lives. And I agree with Bruce Hood in a way, in that I think my definition of happiness would be a baseline feeling of contentment and peace and gratitude. Baseline happiness is being hopeful and believing that things can change and having a balanced view of the world, being able to give attention to both the positives and the negatives, but being able to differentiate between the negatives and decide which ones aren't deserving or which ones don't need your energy or attention. Now, feeling happy and away with the fairies 24/7 and being perfectly content with absolutely every facet of your life, those things are not necessary to experience happiness by that definition. I think when we're depressed, we can feel so far away from singing and dancing and being away with said fairies that getting back to happiness can feel insurmountable. But actually, when we readjust our expectations of what happiness is, it doesn't seem so hard to get back to. And maybe all we need is a tiny leg up to get out of the hole that we're stuck in and back onto the path of gratitude, hope, okayness, and a balanced view of life. I think you can still feel a bit tired and emotionally unsteady maybe when you're back on the path, and I think that's probably a little bit how I feel at the moment, to be honest. It's like the hole's still in sight if I look back over my shoulder and I don't feel like I'm experiencing my peak positivity and energy levels. I think they're probably still over a little hill in front of me still. But I'm on the path to them. I think I'm on the path of okayness again. I'm feeling hopeful and positive about my circumstances and confident that I will be able to work my way out of this because I've done it before and I have more coping strategies now and I know better how to look after myself now than I did back then. All of that tells me that I am okay, and that to me is happiness. Just keeping in mind that specific definition has helped me stay hopeful, and it's helped remind me that actually things are far more in my control than maybe I think they are. The path to a happy baseline doesn't go over a mountain after all. It maybe just goes over a little hill. So kind of following on from what I said about putting unnecessary effort into things that we think will make us happy, the next thing that I want to talk about is the changes that I've made to my routine. It was only 3 episodes ago that I talked about my top 4 healthy habits and how if I'm ever going for a rough patch, I tend to strip my routine back to those 4 things. And that's basically what I've done, just as a little refresh. I've stripped it back down to exercising, walking, reading and journaling. My voice is really struggling right now, so I might hold on to the emotional support Stanley just for a bit so I have quicker, easier sipping access. But what was I going to say? Oh, I think different habits and routines serve you best at different seasons in your life, and different seasons and patches are going to require different things of you. So, like for example, before June, I was enjoying a much more varied workout schedule. So I was doing weightlifting at the gym twice a week. I'd do an upper body day, lower body day. I was doing Pilates workouts twice a week at home, and then I was running twice a week. And I sort of scrapped that for the time being, and I'm now doing 2 full body workouts using weights a week at the gym. It's the same workout, so I've not got the added complexity of an upper and lower day. And then I'm doing 4 45-minute treadmill walks a week. So I'm still exercising 6 days a week. I'm still getting the mental health benefits of that, the hormonal benefits, but it's an easier, more manageable routine for me at the moment. And it's I wouldn't say it's more fun. It's different in the sense that if I'm doing a treadmill walk, I can put some TV on, which for almost all of July was Love Island, or I can make notes on a podcast, or I can do some writing of my own. But that specifically has allowed me to habit stack with something that really brings me joy. Overall, I think it's a less challenging routine, which has been better for me at the moment because everything's been feeling a little bit harder at the minute, and it's more flexible and easier to adapt around my changing mood and energy levels. So apart from completely switching up my workout routine, I've also changed up my morning routine, which used to take me between 2.5 and 3 hours and now takes me an hour tops. I've stripped it back down to a 5 to 20 minute walk, depending on how I'm feeling, a slightly longer journaling session, just because I think I could do with the extra gratitude and positivity and problem solving at the moment, as well as making sure I'm giving myself plenty of time each day to get my thoughts down on paper, and I make sure I have a proper breakfast. All of that takes me an hour max. And then aside from those switch ups, I've also implemented a few new habits. So on mornings when the weather's good, I will end my morning walk in the park and do my journaling there, sat on the grass. And I've also started doing a lot more of my podcast work in cafes, which is something that I'd done a couple of times before, but I'd never made it a regular practice, probably partly because it's so fucking expensive. But it's like that money has been 100% worth it to me, because it's given me something to look forward to when I'm getting out of bed in the morning. It's given me a change of environment. I'm seeing people, I'm exchanging words with the baristas, and again, the change in environment I think really helps my focus. And I've especially loved doing it on days where I don't start work until 9 or 10 or 11 o'clock. I'll go to the cafe beforehand so that I'm getting in a couple of hours on something that's really means something to me and makes me happy before I go and spend my day working for somebody else. And I get a tasty coffee alongside it. It's really injected some joy back into my days. There were a couple of other points to all the changes. The first one being to get rid of any millstones, by which I mean anything that you keep putting time, effort, or energy into in the effort to gain something that is actually working to your detriment. So like, I think we're having a 2.5 hour morning routine and a 4-ish hour after work / evening routine really worked for me when I was doing well and I wasn't struggling, and it did really make me happy, and it allowed me to make sure that I made time every day for everything that needed doing and was important to me. I think trying to stick to them through this depressive patch actually made me more unhappy, because I was trying and failing to keep up with more things than I had capacity for. So for example, having a spotless flat has become a little bit less important to me over the last couple of months, because I think I would rather have everything be a little bit dustier and more cluttered for a while if it means that I've got more time for things that are going to inject joy and happiness back into my life, like the podcast and even reading a book, things that I'm going to enjoy, because I'm needing some more of those mood boosters at the moment to keep me balanced. So before, it was part of my evening routine. After I'd had dinner, I would do 15 to 30 minutes of tidying and cleaning and household work to keep the environment nice, and then I would go on a 10-minute walk afterwards. And I've stopped holding myself to those things, and now once I've had dinner, I do what I want, I do what I feel like doing. To summarise, I think getting rid of habits temporarily that have become millstones has allowed me to put the podcast back at the top of my priorities list again, even with reduced capacity and energy. And that's made me so much happier, because it's brought more joy back into my life and it's given me a stronger sense of purpose again. The second point of a change is that switch up in my routine and trying new things like the outside journaling and the working in a cafe always makes me feel a bit better, because it really helps me to feel like I'm transitioning out of my downer era and into a new phase. You know, it always seems to make me feel a bit better when I hit an obstacle, because it makes it feel like a fresh start. It puts some separation between the past and the future and helps me believe that they can look very different. Then another thing that I wanted to talk about was the importance of learning and practicing good habits for your mental health whilst you're in a really good place, instead of waiting until you're in a hole to start looking after it. Build a journaling or mindfulness practice. Learn to push yourself to exercise whilst you have the mental strength and capacity to work on it, because when you're down and out is not the time to be pushing yourself to new physical and mental limits. Yes, exercising and writing are harder when I'm depressed, and there are still days where it can feel really difficult to choose to do those things over staying in bed, at home, scrolling on my phone, or gaming half a day away on The Sims, because those things are more comforting and they're a quick and easy distraction from my feelings. But I know that making the difficult decision to go to the gym would feel beyond difficult. It would feel outside of the realms of possibility for me if I hadn't built those habits when I was well. Like, if you went back and talked to 19-year-old Anya, who was mid-mental breakdown and had never set foot in a gym in her life, and if you told her that she needed to start going on 6 days a week if she wanted to get better, she would have laughed you out of the room. There's no way that realistically she would have been able to go and do that. I didn't step foot in a gym for the first time until I was 22 years old. I was in a great place and I was still shitting myself, not literally, but I was so nervous about going in and not knowing exactly where to walk and worrying that somebody would look at me and know that I didn't know exactly what I was doing. And that was when I was well. So if you put depressed and anxious Anya in that same scenario, the nerves would have been times 100, times 1,000, and I don't think she would have had the mental energy or focus to even know where to start, let alone the motivation. Because also I think when we're in a really low place, it can be much harder to keep in mind a realistic perception of what's going to help. Like, I think I've spoken about this before as well, but I think when you're feeling really low, it can be really hard when people say things like exercise will make you feel better, going for a walk will make you feel better, making a cup of tea will make you feel better, because your problems feel so big, you think, how the fuck are any of those things going to help me? Whereas when you're well, that is when you can be doing the learning about the effects that those healthy habits will have on your brain and body, and how that will help your mental health. And you don't then magically forget them the next time that you become unwell, and you're then better equipped to maybe make some better informed decisions. So now that I've stuck to the habit of going to the gym for 2 years, the only barrier between me and that activity is feeling low on energy and unmotivated. But because it's habitual, I don't need that motivation. All I need to do is walk myself 5 minutes down the road to the gym and switch on to autopilot, and my body and my brain will do the rest for me. There's no first time nerves. I know exactly what I'm doing. I just need to let my brain and body do it. Again, it is so much easier to make positive choices because I set myself up for success when I was well. You don't teach someone how to do brain surgery by unleashing them on somebody who's in urgent need of emergency care without any training. You teach them how to do it in a controlled setting so that they can go into the emergency room knowing what they're doing and fully equipped to handle the situation. I see looking after your mental health the same way. You need to learn how to take care of your brain before it needs taking care of, because then when it does need it, you're equipped to rise to the occasion. Your mental health is something that can be strengthened when you're in a good place. I think that's a really good way to look at it. So whilst you have the capacity, practice and get in the habit of things that make you feel better, and reflect on your life and identify what brings you up and what brings you down. Because then when you get to a place like I've gotten to over the past couple of months, if you've done all those things, it almost feels like your past self has thrown a rope ladder down into the hole for you, and then all you need really is a small leg up to get you onto that ladder and out of the hole back onto the path of okayness again. That's much, much more achievable than scrambling out of a hole with your bare hands. And it makes things so much easier when you hit crisis point. Next, I want to quickly go back to what I was saying earlier about down patches being necessary to be able to experience happiness. I think they're also necessary to spur us to grow and change. There's a concept that I love to keep in mind called the region beta paradox. And it basically shows that sometimes we're actually better off when things are a bit worse, because it pushes us to actually do something about it and change something. So if, for example, there's a really good video actually that I've seen on it that I'll link in the description, but one of the examples it uses is that if you're stuck in a job that isn't that fulfilling, but there are other benefits to it, say it's really well paid or it's in a good location where you don't have much of a commute, you'd actually be better off if you got moved to an office that meant you had to drive an hour there and back each day, or if something else happened to make you more miserable at work, because that would push you to change something and find another job where you could be happier than you were before. So actually hitting this low point in the long run makes you better off than you would have been if you'd have stayed there, because that low point has enabled you to get to there. Sorry, if you're not watching the video, I was just doing some hand movement stuff, but that's the crux of it. Basically, sometimes hitting a real low can help speed track the process to getting better and help us soar back up past where we even were before. I was extremely happy before June, but things weren't perfect, and I think this little adventure down this hole has shown me where things could be better, and I do think I'm on track now to feel even happier than I was before. I feel like I have a renewed understanding on how integral working on the podcast is to my happiness, which has led to me prioritizing it more, which has made me even happier. And from going back to therapy, I've been able to see some wants and needs that maybe weren't being met in terms of my relationships, which has allowed me to address that, get them met, and I'm feeling even better for it now. There are lots of things that I think wouldn't have happened if I'd have carried on breezing through my weeks like I was doing. And I think I'm now much, much better off for it. And finally, an idea that I love to remind myself of is that maybe I'm not going in circles. Maybe I'm growing in spirals. It can be so disheartening when you feel like something's been going really well, like your mental health has been brilliant for a long period of time, and you think maybe you're past struggling with it, to go through a rough patch or a decline in it again. And I certainly worried for a bit that, like, shit, have I just gone round in a circle back to where I started again? You know, did I ever make any improvement at all, or am I always going to circle back to being depressed and unwell? But actually, as long as you've learnt one tiny thing since you last hit your low point, you've not circled back to where you were, you've actually spiraled up a level. And maybe you'll get back to feeling great again, aka being on the right side of the circle, which is maybe, say, here, and then you go for another rough patch or something goes wrong and you hit a downer again and you spiral up back to the bad side of the circle, and then you resolve that, you overcome it, you spiral back round to the right side. All this while you're still moving up. You're actually still better off than you were before, even when it doesn't necessarily feel like it. Because as you're spiraling, you're learning and getting stronger. And as long as you're learning something, I don't think you can ever be moving backwards. Obviously, growth and healing isn't ever going to be linear, and I'm not saying that we're all in this constant stage of improvement, but I think it can be helpful to see that although you may not be growing at a consistent rate, and so you might do a bit of this, I think most of the time people generally are on like a roundabout trajectory to up, if that's the right way of saying it. The last thing that I want to say is that I know that lots of people have very mixed experiences with therapy, and I know that not everybody has access to it. It's not affordable for everybody unless you're getting access for a charity or your university, school, company, whatever. And I know it can take a lot of shopping around, let's say, to find somebody who's a good fit for you sometimes. But I think if you can afford it, or if your university or work offers it, or you can find a local charity that could support you with it, I will always be the biggest advocate for trying it. I think it has massively helped me climb out of my own hole this time around, because my therapist asked me questions that I wouldn't have thought to ask myself, which leads me to get answers to problems that I wouldn't have been able to come to on my own. Obviously, she has a whole wealth of knowledge and expertise that I don't at this moment in time. And she's been able to identify patterns and issues where, again, I wasn't able to identify them on my own. I do genuinely feel like therapy has been the leg up that I needed to get to my own rope ladder this time around. And just to circle back to the point that I was making earlier about looking after your mental health while you have the capacity, and just to hammer that in, I think one of the biggest takeaways from this depressive episode, whatever you want to call it, that I've gotten this time is that it has felt so different to when I feel like I've gone through depressive patches before, because I've built that really stable foundation, which has been that rope ladder for me, and it's made it feel so much easier to start climbing out of. And also, I don't think I've reached anywhere close to the same levels or depths of despair and hopelessness that I ever did before, because I could always see that rope ladder there. So before I wrap things up, I'm just going to reel off the key points that I've hit on today, and I've written them neatly in my notes, so I'm going to read them off there. First one is, being a fresh graduate can be really fucking hard. And if you're struggling, there's nothing wrong with you and you're not alone. Happiness isn't everything being sunshine and rainbows all the time. It's an overarching or baseline feeling of okayness. If you're struggling, try getting rid of any millstones in your life and or committing to some new, joyful habits instead, to give you something to look forward to and to signify a fresh start. Build systems that set you up for success whilst you're in a good place. Don't wait until you're in a bad place to start looking after your mental health. Sometimes hitting a low can springboard you onto new heights that you wouldn't have been able to reach before. When you feel like you're going in circles, you might actually be spiraling upwards. And if you're struggling and you've not done so already, I do think looking into therapy can be invaluable. That's all from me. I feel like I should give the usual spiel. If you got anything from this, enjoyed it, learned anything, want to support me anyway, please consider following, liking, subscribing, leaving a comment or review, literally any type of engagement, or go and follow me on TikTok and Instagram. That would help me get my content out to more people, which means that the people who can benefit from it are gonna be able to find it more easily. Apart from that, I will speak to you again in 2 weeks' time. I'm gonna say it and make it happen and keep the consistent streak up. Even though it's lasted 2 episodes so far. But I have so much love for whoever's listened, and if you are one of those people who's struggling, then I see you and I care about you, and just know that it is possible for things to get better and for things to start looking up. But look after yourself until I next talk to you, and bye for now.